Okay, Abid. Well, I've already started. I thought, oh, this is a bit of a delay in me starting. I think I'll just kind of start my doodling. So what I'm trying to achieve here in the portrait Abid is a sense of who is Abid Hussain. So could you tell me a little bit of a potted history about who is the real Abid Hussain?
I'd be happy to. I need to make one clarification though. Funding wasn't conditional on me getting painted, so it's important to clear that up. Who am I?
Yeah, who are you?
I think there's probably 3 different versions of me. I think there's probably the version that you guys see, whether you like or dislike, depending on where we go with some of our policy making. I think there's probably the side of me that my family and friends see. So actually when I'm not actually working at the Arts Council. And then I guess there's that part of me that no one sees. That's kind of your inner self, which is, I guess, you deal with all the stuff that you're dealing with professionally, you're dealing with all the stuff that you have around you in your family and personal life. And I guess the part of me that I enjoy most is the person I'm at home. So when you come home and you've had a really long day or a difficult day, it's just great to go home and actually unwind with the kids. So I've got 3 kids. They're 7, 9, and 2.5. They're 3 girls. So it's interesting in terms of the gender dynamic that we have at home. And sometimes I just really welcome having time completely to myself when the girls go to the grandparents. Then I can watch what I want, when I want, and do what I want. But I think whichever version of me that I look at, I think there's this really key element of being authentic and being yourself. So whether it's a policymaker, whether it's being a dad or a friend, or whether it's just being at home on my own with my thoughts, I think it's really important to me that I'm true to myself, and whatever I do, that I actually apply that sense of purpose to kind of drive what I do and the decisions I make. And I think as long as you do that, whether you make mistakes or whether you kind of sometimes go in a direction that you didn't plan on going, there's a bit of sincerity there and a sense of purpose. So that's a kind of very quick introduction to who I am. I guess my Twitter profile says a lot about me as well. So it's also a chance for you to follow me at Artie Abid. But I think there I just describe myself as a dad, a Muslim, and somebody who supports Blackburn Rovers Football Club. Yeah.
Cool. You see, I was getting the eyes in while you were telling me that, Abid.
Actually, we're not doing okay. We're in the relegation zone, so.
So I was just getting your eyes in at that point, because your eyes were telling me all the story. And I got your beautiful long eyelashes there.
You know what? My wife tells me I've got nice eyelashes.
Okay, our next question, Abid, is my latest project was called Portraits Untold. Portraits Untold. And it's a series of live portrait events in some serious venues. And could you tell me what, in terms of the creative case, how do you think that project kind of prescribes that idea of the creative case?
You're getting me into policy mode now,
aren't you?
I think what's really interesting for me when we talk about the creative case, it's about actually making sure everybody's represented. So for me, the creative case is very much about saying the art that we produce in England should reflect all of our communities, and there should be a sense of equity within that. And it's not about kind of saying people should be represented because the law requires it or the Arts Council wants you to do it.
Yeah.
It should be because it makes great art. So I
Yeah.
think at the heart of the creative case, I always start with that kind of sense of purpose, that it's about making art better, it's making art more meaningful. And I think what I really enjoy about Portraits Untold, and actually having spent some time in Birmingham when you were painting John Acumfra, was actually we were telling stories of people from all different backgrounds. Some who are very kind of familiar to the arts world, other people who are probably less familiar. But I think it's about recognizing and celebrating difference. And I think that's really important. I think representation is really key. So one of the things that is really critical to me, whether it's work in our galleries or work on our stage, do we see ourselves and our stories? And I think Portraits Untold does that. And as a parent, that's become a lot more important to me. Because when I take my kids to the theatre, or if they're running around a gallery, do they see themselves and their stories reflected? So I think that's at the heart of the creative case. And I think what you've managed to capture is something which really kind of speaks to the heart of the creative case.
Yeah.
I think the other thing which is really interesting is how it's brought different partners on board. So you've worked with Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, you've worked with heritage venues, you've worked
National
with the Football
Portrait
Club,
Gallery, Football Club.
and then you've got the National Portrait Gallery. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of recognising that the creative case and the responsibility for that is for all of our organisations. So it shouldn't just be our diverse organisations, it should be those larger institutions as well. And I think that's where it kind of comes back to this whole thing about representation and resource, because for me the conversation about diversity should take place at the same time as you're deciding about programming, curating, commissioning, because that's when you spend the money.
Yeah.
And the money needs to go and be distributed more equitably. And I think that's really key. And I think what was really interesting about the Portraits Untold project, I mean, it was an individual grant, and this is when I go into Arts Council plug mode, I guess. But it was a fairly significant investment in an individual. And I think it's really important for the Arts Council that if we're serious about the creative case, the level of investment we make in the creative case is significant and allows artists to create work of scale and ambition and have the same access to resources that other artists who are probably more represented than some of those underrepresented communities. We all have the same equal access to some of those resources, and that's an ongoing challenge, because I think as an Arts Council, I think it's important for us to get that balance right and kind of keep shifting that balance to kind of make sure the money that we invest and distribute kind of gets to the people and the voices that we need to see more of in our stages and in our galleries. I'm happy so
You're
far.
head and shoulders now. Okay, so for our final question in this little interlude, is the portrait's actually coming along really quickly, isn't it? Hey? Any doodles out there yet?
Keep them nice.
Yeah. So we're just going to talk about the portrait itself for a minute, Abid. So I've been twittering you on private messages, asking you some questions, haven't I?
She does Twitter a lot.
I do. Because I wanted to know a bit more about what kind of things that you like in terms of colour, and what else did I ask you?
I think it was about the colours.
Yeah.
And the choice of colours.
So you picked, colours did you pick?
I think I went for blue and green.
Blue and green.
Yeah.
For what was the significance of those?
I think blue is the colour of Blackburn Rovers, isn't it? Blue and
Yeah.
white. So, yeah, I think that's really important. I think the green was, I've got my priorities straight. I think the green had a slightly more spiritual significance. And I think when I think of green and blue, I think a lot more of nature and the things that kind of uplift me. So I think we're all happier when it's a sunny day, when there's a blue sky and we're in open spaces. And like I said earlier, I think the green has a slightly more spiritual significance as a Muslim. And I think it's It's really interesting because
So I try to interpret those colours as a background.
yeah, because I think it's what I said in the first
Yeah.
question. I think it's what drives you as a person, and I like to think I'm a fairly calm person. I think I try and think rationally when I
Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
because I think the field I work in, when you
Yeah.
work in diversity, it's extremely political, it's extremely personal, it's very emotive, and I think you need to be able to have difficult conversations, and you need to have a sense of purpose and neutrality and confidence in having those conversations, because I think quite often you're also playing the role of someone who's taking a confessional,
Yeah.
because I think diversity is personal, and we don't always all agree on our kind of interpretations of diversity, what works and what doesn't work. So I think going into any conversation, whether someone's going to agree with me or challenge me, I do need to have a sense of neutrality. And I think that's where the importance of listening and being calm and relaxed is really important. I remember one of my first line managers at the Arts Council said to me, if I was any more relaxed, I'd be horizontal. But I think it's really important, because I
Yeah.
think when you deal with a lot of really difficult conversations, you need to have a sense of calm.
Absolutely.
And those colours
Yeah.
give me that. And I
Yeah.
think on that spiritual side, I guess, as somebody who's got a very strong sense of being Muslim, it's been really interesting, and especially after what happened yesterday in London. And I mean, my thoughts, my love and my prayers are with the victims of the attack. But I think every time something like that happens, it breaks you a bit, because I think you realize you're going to be going into work tomorrow, you're going to be going into that public role, and you're going to have to talk about it, you're going to have to respond to it. And for me, that's where arts and culture is really, really important. And once you've shaken yourself down a bit, you kind of need to get back into that public space, and you really need to kind of be in a position where, I guess, you can actually demonstrate a side of what you believe in and what you practice, that you believe is what gives you purpose. And I think it's really important at a time in society where the actions of a very small minority try and divide us, that actually we use arts and culture to kind of really challenge those divisive challenges, and really kind of show that there's a better way and that we can actually unite and come together. So I think I'm feeling in a strange place today, because it's something that hits you really hard, because you want to kind of think about actually what happened yesterday, but then actually there's also a challenge for me in terms of how I respond. And I guess one of the things I found last year was when one of my daughters asked me the question why Donald Trump hates Muslims. And as a parent, how do you begin to answer that without kind of creating the same hate or rhetoric in your children's mind that kind of drove that thinking? I'm going to keep talking even though I've heard the bleeping. Unless you want me to stop talking, I'm happy to stop talking if the gong needs to go. But I just think it's... we all have a role and purpose, and I think as artists, we should challenge, we should provoke, but we can also kind of heal at the same time.
Okay, thank you. And don't forget to send us your images, because we're going to project them later on.